So there's an interesting new report that's going around stating that third-party games on the Nintendo Switch 2 were lower than expected outside of a couple titles like Cyberpunk and potentially even Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, looking at all things considered. So I want to get into that, what was said from the game business, in addition to what some other people are saying about what they're buying or not, to see what's really happening with the Nintendo Switch 2 and third-party game sales, and what's going to happen in the future when it comes down to game key cards versus physical game sales, digital sales, and more. So there's a lot to talk about with that, in addition to some other big game news with more rumors on Stellar Blade, and of course the incredible showing that Donkey Kong Bonanza had, and more updates for Nintendo Switch 1 games backwards compatible with better compatibility, I should say, more like it. So let's go ahead and jump right into the first topic here. Let's discuss what is going on with the third-party game sales so far in the early life of the Nintendo Switch 2. So according to the game business, which they've been doing all sorts of reporting and starting up different types of industry analytics and things like that, they've talked about how some third-party developers have expressed some concern when it comes to third-party game sales. Well, really only one said that. They said it sold lower than their expectations, and many people are pointing to Square Enix as that developer, but that's not confirmed, and it was just one developer or one publisher that said that. For the most part, they're just essentially looking at percentages and comparing them and saying, well, it's mostly first party games. So let's get into the actual data here. So they said that 62% of Switch 2 physical game sales in the US launch week were from first party games, excluding the Mario Kart World bundle. That's from Circana. 48% of Switch 2 physical games in the UK launch week were from first party games, excluding the Mario Kart World bundle. That's from Nielsen IQ. 86% of Switch 2 physical game sales in the UK launch week were from first-party games, including the Mario Kart World bundle. That's from Nielsen IQ. By comparison, for the Nintendo Switch 1 launch, 89% of UK physical game sales were from first-party games. Nielsen IQ has that. And for the launch month of the Switch 1 in the US, 81% of US physical game sales were from first-party games. That's from Circana. Now, CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 was apparently the best-selling third-party game during the launch of the Switch 2, beating the launch sales of CD Projekt Red's The Witcher 3 on Nintendo Switch 1. That's from Nielsen IQ. Sega was the third biggest publisher on the Switch 2 at launch. Circana has that. Now, when it comes to the games released both physically and digitally, over 80% of Switch 2 game sales came from physical retailers. Data was shared by some publishers. So this is a lot of, I would say, scattershot data all over the place that doesn't necessarily get to the specifics of what sold the numbers wise. Like, we can look at the Famitsu, for example, which recently came out again, and we can see, okay, Nintendo Switch 1, Nintendo Switch 2, this is what's selling. Okay, this has an upgrade path. The physical game sales are here. Here's what the actual console sold. So it really kind of tells us everything. This is just more of percentages and them saying, hey, well, look, the Nintendo Switch 2 launched with a lot more third-party games than the Nintendo Switch 1, so the ratio splits should have been better. That's what I got from them, and that's what they essentially said on their website, saying, well, look, it's better percentage-wise than what the Nintendo Switch 1 was, but the Nintendo Switch 1 did not launch with stuff like Split Fiction and all these other third-party games and Hitman and all this other stuff. Plus, the Nintendo Switch 2 had a much bigger launch when it comes to the system itself. OJ, the editor, coming in here to talk more about this when it comes down to it. So I want to give you guys some context before we get into the rest of this, is that Matt Piscatella has also came out and talked about the situation when it comes down to the game business article and third-party game sales when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2. And he had this to say on Blue Sky: hate to contribute to a discourse, but third-party share of Switch 2 software in the US is far better than it was during the Switch 1 launch. Third-party unit share of Switch 2 physical software during week 1 reached just shy of 40%. For month 1 of the Switch launch, it was less than 20%. Like, it's far too early to claim best or worst, this or that or whatever when it comes to Switch 2. Sheesh, this thing hasn't even been out for 3 weeks yet. So it is what it is on that, guys. Anyway, yeah, there's going to be some time. It's going to take a little bit to kind of get and really understand exactly how third parties are going to do once we get more time under our belt with the Nintendo Switch 2 launch. And at the investor reports the third party developers can talk about have done, I think that's when we're really going to get a sense of how things are going to go. And on top of that, day and date games, stuff like 007, which I'll talk about, other titles, how do those do when it comes out at the same exact time when it comes to other platforms that are a bit more matured at this point. So a little bit too early. necessarily. I do agree with Mr. Matt Piscatella here, but I do think there are some concerns here and there, which we will get into. So I think that this is really a combination of a lot of different things. People have opinions all over, but I think that this is probably going to be the best take. One, there is an issue with game key cards and the resistance from some fans, especially the core fans that are going to be buying the system right there at launch. There is some resistance from game key cards. From what we understand, Cyberpunk 2077 and Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, from what we can see in Japan and some of the sales, and how it's kind of hard to even find Guardians of Azuma here in the US. A lot of places are out of stock because they didn't necessarily ship a lot, but they're probably selling up to what their expectations are. So you look at the two games overall that are physical, full on cart for third-party developers, both of those games seem to be doing well. Everything else overall could be doing well when it comes to digital sales. There isn't a ton of information in terms of laying that out, but it does seem like some maybe aren't doing as well because the physical sales or game key cards in stores, people aren't buying those as much. So I do think that the game key card situation is not the biggest issue overall, but it's definitely an issue impacting the sales. I would say the second thing is that the backwards compatibility has fixed a lot of people's back catalog. So a lot of people have already purchased a ton of third-party and first-party games on the Nintendo Switch 1. You can instantly plug in those games on the Nintendo Switch 2, and many of them don't even need a patch to run better. A lot of them, if it's a 30 FPS cap, it will lock there and it won't dip like it did on Switch 1, or if it's uncapped, you can play at up to 60 frames per second. Some of the games lock it in, some games are a little bit wavering, but most games play much better on the Nintendo Switch 2 than on the Nintendo Switch 1. So you're seeing a lot of people just play their back catalog of games. Now there is another factor, and I would say that some of the games on the Nintendo Switch 2 were older in terms of ports and people don't want to buy the same game or they've already played it. So I think that there is a factor of all of those with game key cards, with some of the games being older, with the back catalog of games, and of course Mario Kart World, in addition to stuff like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, those getting really nice updates on the Nintendo Switch 2 to where you can play those in 60 FPS. Those are some of the best selling games on the Nintendo Switch 2 as well, physical and digital, with Tears of the Kingdom being a top 3 selling game. So people are definitely buying that physical in addition to getting that digital and upgraded and playing that. So I think that's really what's factoring in and pretty much the cream of the crop when it comes to physical and great games. I think that Guardians of Azuma and Cyberpunk might be the two best third-party games. I mean, outside of obviously Split Fiction and some of those titles, but these are two big RPGs that has a ton of content that people are definitely digging into. So I think all of that is kind of factoring into what some of these publishers are seeing when it comes to low sales numbers overall. But once again, it was one publisher that did say that. We don't know which publisher said that the Switch 2 game sales were lower than their lowest expectations, but we'll see how things progress. Now we have to wait and see how stuff like Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion does. That's going to be another game that's fully on cart. We're going to have to wait and see how Borderlands handles the Switch 2 version. That's not coming day and date. We're going to have to wait and see how like 007 and some of the other titles. There's going to be a lot more games announced for the Nintendo Switch 2, a lot more third-party games. And I think that as the Nintendo Switch 2 install base continues to grow, I think the game sales will get better. One more extra thing to kind of note here is that we don't have the full picture when it comes to third-party digital sales, as well as most publishers haven't said anything at this point. So waiting for NPD and other sales trackers, or even for the companies themselves to talk about this in their investor sales reports, is probably going to be where we're going to get a better picture of how things are down the line. Another thing that we can kind of pull from this as well, considering how Rune Factory and Cyberpunk seem to be doing, is that making your game fully on cart definitely could help improve overall the aspects when it comes to the game sales. So maybe this will entice more developers to choose fully on the cart despite the expensive cartridges. Choose that option instead of going with game key card or just code in a box, or just game key card and digital only. Now there is another factor that the game business put in, that, oh well, third-party games didn't get reviews from the websites, but I don't really think that's as big of a factor, as a lot of these games already got reviews on other platforms. So people probably already had the game, or they saw what the game was about and they just decided to either get it or not. So I don't think that's as big of a factor overall when it comes down to it, but it might be somewhat of a factor to kind of put in with the other things. But I still feel that going forward, we're going to see better sales when it comes to the install base raising up. We have the same issue just a little bit on the Nintendo Switch 1. There wasn't as many games though, but it did seem like third-party games necessarily weren't doing as well. But once the system actually got going, I do think that the sales did pick up. So I think that's going to happen here with the Nintendo Switch 2 as more and more people finish or play Mario Kart, as more and more people actually get the system, finish up Cyberpunk or Guardians of Azuma. I think that they're going to pick up other games down the line. And once we start seeing a couple price drops here and there for some of these game key cards or for some of these titles when it comes to digital sales, I think that's also going to improve things down the line. But what's also going to improve down the line are the giveaways here, as we're going to have Donkey Kong Bananza as a big giveaway in July. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know what your favorite aspect of Donkey Kong Bonanza is so far. But let's go and jump into Donkey Kong Bonanza right now while we're at it, because there was a huge Nintendo Direct, or more like Donkey Kong Bonanza Direct, that showed off a ton of great features and new things to Donkey Kong Bonanza. I saw so many people say that they were not sold on this game, but now they are sold on this game. And I think that's one of the reasons why, that if you have a good direct focus on a game that you haven't shown much of, usually single player games, because you don't want to spoil too much early on, I think that can do wonders for the game itself and the public perception of the game. Donkey Kong Bonanza that absolutely flipped people's opinions and got them excited to pre-order, pick up the amiibo, and just get excited for Donkey Kong to be back in a whole new way. First 3D adventure outing for Donkey Kong since the N64. So I want to go over some of the key points when it comes to Donkey Kong Bonanza and what they said about this game. You have new ways to smash and bash. Obviously, Donkey Kong, powerful abilities. It was really exciting to kind of see that. The Bonanza transformations, this one has me super excited to kind of get in and really have these different transformations to where you can play the game and to where you can experience Donkey Kong kind of like in a whole different type of way. I do think that having Pauline as like your co-star in this with her singing abilities, having the ability to have the online play and the co-op stuff is actually pretty cool. They've done a great job in infusing, I would say, Pauline as a main character gameplay wise now at this point. So I really like the whole Bonanza transformations. The co-op play is fantastic because it gets you, of course, like if you want to play like little brother, little sister, son, daughter, whatever the case is, nieces, nephews, it gets them a way to get involved. But you also have online play with Game Share, even with Nintendo Switch 1 systems. So I thought that was pretty cool as well, and just kind of adds more to the value of the game. I do like the core premise of the game, how you race to the planet core and you keep kind of going down. So it kind of gives you that emphasis of digging, yet going through an adventure as you get closer and closer to the big bad, bosses that are there. So I love that as well. Tons of collectibles overall with Bandanium chips and Bandanium gems and chip exchanges. I love what they did with the different collectibles and with the upgrades and abilities. This is where this game kind of takes off, in my opinion, because I wasn't expecting there to be like a skill point system and to have clothing that affects what you do overall in terms of like your swimming speed and stuff like that for Pauline, in addition to Donkey Kong. So all of that really just kind of gels and makes this game very exciting overall. I also love what they did with the various different challenge levels and stuff like that. Donkey Kong has always been about challenge levels overall, but sometimes they can be a little bit repetitive in past games. This one seems to have a wide variety of different challenge levels overall that's even a little bit kind of like Tears of the Kingdom at times, where you have to figure out certain ways to progress or kind of use the planet or use different types of ways or puzzles to solve what you need to do in like a action sense. So I did love that as well. They also added some pretty interesting and funny type of game modes. They have photo mode, of course, but the new paint mode, where it's essentially like a Mario Paint style thing, but like Mario 64 as well, to where you can use the Joy-Con mouse and kind of paint. That's kind of cool. Not necessarily anything super crazy, but I think they just wanted to have something there that uses the mouse mode overall. And I'm pretty sure people are going to be completely on their best behavior when it comes to that paint mode too. So overall, man, I'm excited and looking forward to Donkey Kong Bonanza. I think it's going to be a great game overall. Mario Odyssey was one of the best rated games of all time and of last gen. Can this game, which does seem to be made by at least some of the team members that made Mario Odyssey, can this game even hit anywhere near that? I think it might be tough because it's Donkey Kong and people just consider Mario higher than Donkey Kong overall. But I do think that from what we've seen so far, Donkey Kong Bonanza is looking like a 90+ rated game. But we're going to have to wait and see till we actually get it in our hands and play and see how all of the game kind of gels and comes together. But I am super excited to get into Donkey Kong Bonanza on July 17th. So what do you guys think about the game? Let me know in the comment section below. But next, we're going to move on to some big rumors when it comes to Stellar Blade on the Nintendo Switch 2, which we did cover already, because in their investor meeting, Shift Up talked about how they want to have a platform expansion, and many felt that the Nintendo Switch 2 could be that. But now we have some other rumors coming in that Shift Up is looking to port the game to Nintendo Switch 2, and it kind of goes off the heels of them gifting all of their employees Nintendo Switch 2 systems. So another rumor has emerged that suggests that Korean publisher Shift Up is planning to bring Stellar Blade to Nintendo Switch 2. The company generously gifted its employees Nintendo Switch 2 consoles, and a report on Korean Play Forum suggests that Stellar Blade is currently in development for Nintendo Switch 2. Developer Shift Up said on the forum that nothing is confirmed regarding the development of a Switch 2 version, though it said that it was reviewing various possibilities internally. So essentially what that means is that yes, they are looking into and probably started work on Stellar Blade for the Nintendo Switch 2. If you're gifting all of your employees Nintendo Switch 2 systems, you definitely want them to be familiar with the system and what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are. So if you have the system, you can see that, and then you can do a better job on the port. And it does seem to be like Shift Up was one of the developers that later got a Nintendo Switch 2 dev kit overall. And they even stated in their investor report that they want to have platform expansion. So gifting your employees Nintendo Switch 2s, and also saying, hey, look, nothing is confirmed, but we are kind of looking at various different possibilities. Yeah, it does seem like Shift Up is going to be porting Stellar Blade to Nintendo Switch 2 and probably have an announcement at a Nintendo Direct, because this is a huge game overall, a game that has sold 3 million units plus between the PC and the PlayStation 5 platform. And also, if you look at this, they gifted all of their employees PS5 Pros as well. And then what came after that? PS5 Pro patch, from what I understand. Or what were they working on? PS5 Pro patch for the game. So it just makes sense that Stellar Blade is probably going to be coming over to the Nintendo Switch 2, as the Switch 2 is looking to be incredibly popular in the Asian regions overall, with sales pretty much blowing out a lot of different records in various different countries that the Switch 2 is on sale at this point. So I do think that Stellar Blade is coming. Now, I originally played the game on the PlayStation 5, and I thought it was fantastic. I think it's a great game overall. So I'm interested to see what type of version they can make on the Nintendo Switch 2 and how it would actually play, considering the PS5 version is definitely good. It's got a performance mode, quality mode, a balanced mode. I think it even has like a 40 FPS mode. So I'm wondering exactly what they're going to do in terms of visual quality compared to the frame rate, compared to the effects, to kind of get this game running on the Nintendo Switch 2 efficiently on portable and in docked, because you have to have two separate profiles there. So it's going to be fun to check that out. And for the last topic, we're going to move over to some updates for the Nintendo Switch 2 to let you guys know when it comes down to games and the system itself. So the Nintendo Switch 2 has been updated to version 20.1.5. The patch notes are essentially the tried and true general system stability improvements to enhance the user's experience. So we don't exactly know what that consists of, but yes, they are updating the system. Now, there was some situations that was going on with the whole MIG switch thing and them banning stuff, so they could be doing further things to make sure that that doesn't work properly overall on the Nintendo Switch 2. There could also potentially be some adjustments to the battery situation going on with the display and the profile overall. So I think that that could be a thing. And of course, just making sure the system doesn't crash and doesn't have issues, because some people did report issues of that. Now, another thing that we have is Pikmin 3 Deluxe version 1.1.3 and Animal Crossing New Horizons version 2.0.8. And essentially what those do is that both of them have fixed compatibility issues for the backwards compatibility on the Nintendo Switch 2. If you're playing these games, these are both Switch 1 titles. On the Switch 2, there were issues overall when it comes to different fixes and problems and crashing and glitching and certain things happening. Those have been fixed, it seems like. So you should have a better experience when playing Pikmin 3 and Animal Crossing New Horizons on the Nintendo Switch 2. So that's going to wrap it up for everything here, guys. When it comes to the third-party situation on the Nintendo Switch 2, Donkey Kong, Stellar Blade, and more, let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.